Hi everyone, this is Rowan with Sandstone Care. Today I'm here with Tim Harrington. Hey Tim, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Tim Harrington, and I have a company called, now for 10 years, called Sustainable Recovery. And the foundation of that company is the interest in what is a sustainable recipe or prescription for any one person to not just get into recovery, but to stay in recovery.
Cool. And so we've been talking a little bit already about kind of what that means. It seems like the population you're really honing in on now is the quote unquote failure to launch population, which is something that we also really focus on here, is because we're working with the adolescents and the young adults who are often kind of in that age range where they're still trying to figure out what their purpose is, whether that be in recovery or not.
Right.
And I know you mentioned you're not a huge fan of that term.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very sensitive to words in terms of words have a lot of power.
Absolutely.
So the idea of at the age of, well, any age for that matter, but to start calling somebody a failure at anything, I think is something that we can be more aware of in terms of how we are talking to someone who's necessarily not someone with great self-esteem.
Right.
So we don't want to add insult to injury necessarily. So the idea would be, you're in a position in your life right now where it's developmentally appropriate, where you're struggling to find out where your place is in the world.
Yeah.
So a little bit more than just giving them another label or another moniker. I don't think we need any more labels. I always say when I work with families that labels are for bottles and cans.
I like that. And so you were talking about how when you're often working with the whole family system,
Yeah.
or even bigger system.
Yeah.
And often the identified client
Yes.
isn't necessarily the person who is at least appearing to be the most motivated to change. Maybe they have internal motivation, but we haven't
Yeah.
really seen it yet.
Yeah. So for me, the person whatever person has called me is the one I intervene on.
Okay.
And what that means is that what I want to do is just kind of reframe where they are now from somebody who is necessarily failing. Again, that idea of failure. I usually tell parents, I said the only perfect parents are the ones that don't have kids yet. So let's just start at that level and work our way up, because it's probably the hardest job with the least amount of training on the planet.
And you're trying to kind of take away that pressure on them, because they're probably feeling some of that own failure, kind of in that their kid is struggling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no doubt. Parents take it personally. It's one of the things they get stuck in a loop. And I always tell parents, I say that's kind of ironic, because I would suggest that your kid is in that same loop.
Yeah.
And so, as far as what this means, sort of in the bigger picture, is that addiction is not a person. It's not about a drug. It's really about a system.
Okay.
And so, within systems, and I use a comparison a lot with business and business culture, is that we're trying to figure out how best to all get along to reach our goal. Right? Because all businesses have business plans and mission statements.
Yeah.
And so I talk a lot about in family systems about, why don't you have one of those? Why shouldn't your family have its own brand, its own mission statement, and each person contributes to that, so that we can sort of give it some form, because it feels like when we're involved with mental health issues, substance use disorder, things of that nature, the family gets blown out.
Okay.
And so part of my process, whether I'm working with the family member or the identified patient or client, is to get them back on the same page, to sort of restructure, reimagine, and repurpose that family system where they feel closer, more connected, and more empowered.
Okay.
And so let's just take one person out of that system, not the person who's called me the mother or father, but the child, who is necessarily still trying to identify how they fit into the world, which is why I created Launchpad Colorado, was to specifically address this idea of failure to launch, or what we refer to as struggling to thrive.
Okay.
And then we tell that person it's developmentally appropriate for them to be in that position.
Right.
You're still trying to figure yourself out. And we're also dealing with a lot of injected values, not only from the family, but from society and your peers, and school, and now social media, probably the most prevalent influence going on out there.
Yeah.
So that's a real issue. And so we're trying to reframe that so that they understand that their life meaning purpose is somewhere in the mix of all that.
Right.
And there's a lot of noise. So we're going to try to separate out some of that noise and really focus on where they feel like the essence of themselves is somewhere inside here.
Yeah.
And why I say that is because I think there's some confusion, certainly among consumers, that everything is someplace that you go and buy it. Like, can I get life meaning and purpose on Amazon?
Yeah, right. What about eBay?
Yeah, what about eBay? There's lots of choices.
Yeah.
So the idea is to reframe and say, no, you have everything that you need. You come intact with your essence.
Right.
We're just going to go in, we're going to put a miner's helmet on, and we're going to go into internal space or inner space, which I see as the final frontier, as opposed to Elon Musk thinks it's Mars, and I'm thinking it's inside first,
right.
so that we don't just recreate Earth on Mars, where we can be different. So with the kid, it's really like, is that something you'd be interested in doing? It's really, that's the first question.
Okay.
Do you feel like there's something inside you that you're not quite connected with that could be the thing that internally motivates you to move towards some specific life meaning and purpose?
And that seems to be so often kind of the missing ingredient, that secret sauce in recovery, is that it's more than just sobriety. It's more than just, hey, I've made it 90 days. Like, that's a great start.
Yes.
And like, what do you want to do with that? Because I mean, there's so much that's associated with that, in terms of the culture of using and the people that you used with and all that stuff. That can kind of create its own meaning in and of itself. And so, who are you when you're not doing that?
Who are you? Absolutely.
And and your family is often the one who's identified you as having a problem. Who are you within your family system?
Yeah.
And
because again, I mean, we try to disperse the load amongst everyone in the family system.
Yeah.
So the person who's least capable of dealing with the pressure isn't carrying all the pressure.
Right.
And so recovery is team-based. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
From your therapist to just the idea of what Sandstone stands for or what Launchpad stands for, because it's really made up of people. It's made up of belief systems and ideas of, what you're capable of. I mean, you come to some people like us in behavioral health, and one of the first things we're going to tell you is that you can have a great life. I mean, this is not the end of anything.
Right.
This is the beginning of something, and it's really about giving them a process by which they can discover that uniqueness inside them, that power inside of them. Because a lot of this, there's some confusion about powerlessness and what that means. And what I think is that we need to spend a lot more time on what is powerful about someone, at least equal time, about what's powerful about someone, and getting really in touch with one's unique talents, one's unique perspective, one's unique belief system. And so somewhere in there is a spark that leads to that internal motivation, as opposed to sort of the normal way it's set up is external pressure, right? From parents, which is normally how the communication goes. And we're just saying, he's not a child anymore. Let's raise it to an adult relationship and speak to him in a way that empowers him and doesn't make him feel like he's less capable than he really is.
Right. So it sounds like you're really trying to address the bigger system and not just, as you said, like focusing on the person who's already feeling a lot of that pressure. Yeah. So if a family system or an individual wanted to work with you, how would they do that?
So what we like to say at Launchpad is that we don't facilitate anybody's discovery in terms of outside-in pressure.
Okay.
That's the whole premise. The whole premise is that we will deliver unto you many, many questions that will create a distillation process of being unsure to more and more surety, more and more clarity as you go through the process. And these powerful questions, and I've done this process myself, and it really was so enlightening, because you realize how much we live our lives on the surface. Mm-hmm. Barely scratching the surface. And if we get an opportunity like this, and I look at things like addiction and mental health and stuff like that as real opportunities to be able to reimagine who you are. It's not the end of something, it's the beginning of something.
Right.
And so we really look at this as a really powerful opportunity to be able to to really reflect and get meditative about who am I, not who do you think I am.
Who do you want me
I mean,
to be?
who do you want me to
Should
be?
I be? Yeah.
Yes. And so that's really the beginning of the process. So we'll be spending a lot of time going through these questions, and then you'll be spending a lot of time saying, don't send me any questions anymore. I can't answer another question. And that makes sense.
Right.
Because, again, we're used to sort of living on the surface. And so we're going to go
Really
fairly deep.
uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable. And so we'll be able to process that. I'll be able to reframe that and get them back on track,
Okay.
because inevitably they'll become resistant. And that's just natural. And we just sort of make it part of the process that you are going to be resistant. That's just human.
Yeah, we resist change.
We do.
I do it every day.
Every day. That's our challenge, And so that's, I just get so excited because I was sitting one day and I was thinking to myself as I was listening to another person's story about being a failure to launch, struggling to thrive person, and I thought, that's me. I was that person well into my 30s, and it created a tremendous amount of anxiety and tremendous amount of shame. And I thought there's got to be many, many people who are in early recovery, even long-term recovery, who still haven't sort of split their identity between a sober person and a recovering person with who am I
Right.
in relationship to that, not that's who I am. And that's a real opportunity for growth. Yeah. It can be really exciting.
That's really cool. It's such needed work, and I think anything that we can do to kind of drop below that surface and continue to kind of dig and
we're explorers.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
explorers. That's why that's the thing. It's kind of figuring out. I do a lot of reframing because I want to figure out which one that I'm using where the person goes, oh, like, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go with that because that's piquing his interest. He gets the idea of being an explorer because he's a curious person
Right.
by nature, or whatever it is. That's important in the process because to keep someone's attention is a real skill.
Yeah.
And so
There's so many things pulling on our attention.
Yeah, especially the family system, which is why that's a part of the Launchpad programming and training camp, is that we want families to be involved. The system has to be involved. Everyone has to be on the same page, because if we can do that, then that family system can be the cheerleader for this process, and not somebody who is necessarily unintentionally always. I never say intentionally sabotaging, but because we don't have the skill or the viewpoint yet.
Yeah.
Families can unintentionally sabotage a process. And so that's why it's always important that it's always about the system and not about one person.
Right. So that you can extract yourself eventually and have them continue on for
Yeah.
the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And it's not just something where the wheels fall off when the intervention's over.
No, it has to be about extensity, not intensity. It has to be something about the long game. It has to be about... So you may participate in Launchpad in the training camp and you answer all these questions. It doesn't mean all of a sudden everything is hunky-dory and you get it all.
No.
It takes a while for things to develop. So we're always available for these kids to be able to reach out whenever they need, because oftentimes it's not a lot of heavy lifting at that point to get them back on track.
Right.
But they
Just a
need to
little
have
nudge.
that. They need to have that connection ongoing because it's important.
Well, thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you if they want to get involved with Launchpad or they want to, find your services?
Yeah, so sustainablerecovery.net is the main website. The one particular for Launchpad is discoveryourpurpose.net.
Okay.
And then my phone number is 323-804-5555.
And we'll have this all right below the video so that you can find all that information. Thank you so much for coming in,
Thank you.
and thank you so much for watching.